Hi, it's Sifa. This is a story about what happened to me when I was meditating, and I don't know whether to label it under astral projection or shamanism, but I've been studying shamanism in class, so that's what I think it's mostly like. Because I didn't do it on purpose. Like I didn't seek out to travel, like to journey spiritually, but it just kind of like happened to me without me even trying to do anything because I would just be doing these guided meditations and then things started to happen in my guided meditations, like in my head, spiritually. So basically, just a little backstory is that I was dealing with, I was recovering from anorexia and dealing with a lot of body image issues. And then I was also dealing with my best friend stopped talking to me for a period of months, and I was dealing with a lot of anger and sadness about that. So this is kind of what this is about, I think. So basically, what happened is that I was in what the first thing that happened to me is that I found myself on a cliff, and there was just blackness all around me, and I knew it was a cliff, and I knew that it was overlooking the entire universe. And I would stand on this cliff and just scream and scream and scream, and get all of my anger and sadness out, and I would just cry, and it would just flow over this cliff. And then one day, a few days later, I was on the cliff and the moon came out and the stars came out and I could see that I was overlooking a huge like ocean. And and then I would float in the sea. And then something really weird started to happen to me, something really scary. One day I found myself in a black room. And this room had black walls, black ceiling, black floor, and no doors, no windows, or any way to get out. And so I was basically trapped in this room and freaking out and like angry and scared. And on the wall in the room was a picture of my friend, a framed picture. And so I was just like completely scared and just trapped. And so I picked up a knife that was on the table and I started smashing the picture, slicing the picture, and it began to cut my hands and my palms, and I was just bleeding everywhere. And then I began to kill myself in various ways. Like I hung myself with a light bulb, and then I overdosed on pills, and then I slit my wrists, and then I strangled myself, and it was horrifying. Like it was really scary. And then I woke up, and I kind of realized that I was not allowing myself to be angry because I thought that being angry was something bad, and I was punishing myself for being angry at my friend. So the next night, I told myself, it's okay to be angry. Anger is not a bad emotion. It's okay. And I went back into the black room. And her picture's on the wall again. And this time I focused on creating an orb of golden, love in my chest. And I expanded this golden orb. And I expanded it and focused on peace and love. And I was able to expand it enough that it exploded and it knocked all the four walls down, knocked everything flat. And I was on this beautiful hill in the sunlight, in this warm meadow with these beautiful like butterflies and insects and trees. It was just so peaceful and calming. And I was like, you know what? I've conquered this. And then and then a few nights later, something else really weird happened. It got even weirder. I went back in the black room, and and it had been rebuilt, whatever. And this time there were pictures on the wall, but instead it was pictures of my face on like supermodels' bodies with like perfect bodies and it made me so angry and it made me realize like how much I hate myself and how much I hate the fact that I've like gained so much weight since recovering from anorexia. And there were like razor blades all over the table, and I was like, you know what? I could hurt myself with these razor blades. But instead, I threw them to the floor. I just threw them all to the floor. And then I realized that there was a drawer in the table. And I opened the drawer, and there was a golden tablecloth. And I was like, that's really weird. It was literally spun out of pure gold, this tablecloth. And I took it out and I draped it over the table. And I felt that something really, really important had to go on this table. Something really important. And then I became very sick to my stomach. And I began to cough and choke and kind of gag. And I began to cough so hard that it felt like I was coughing something out of my body. And then this large red shape began to emerge from my mouth. And I basically like vomited up this giant red shape. And I realized immediately that it was a little girl. And that she was dying or already dead. And I started to panic because I was like, I have to save this girl. I have to save her. And so I basically nursed her back to health. I cleaned her off. I fixed her up, and I realized that it was little Sifa. And little Sifa is a little girl that I've always thought about and always written stories about. And she's a part of me that I haven't thought about in a long time. And she's basically my inner child, or the good girl inside of me, the innocence inside of me. And so I basically, healed her. And then I took her to the ocean in my mind. And we were in the water. And I knew that that her sister Antonia would come too, but I wasn't ready for Antonia. Because Antonia was a very disturbed and very disturbed soul. Antonia lived in a rusted cage and clawed at herself and screamed all the time. And she represented my rage and my anger and everything destructive inside of me. But we were at the beach and there was a chain emerging from the sea. And I was like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for this. And it began to pull up from the water. And it pulled up Antonia's cage from the depths of the ocean. And she was just lying in there dead. And I didn't know what to do because I was like, I can revive Sifa, but I don't know how to revive Antonia because she's just a whole other basket case. But then the next night I was meditating and I found myself sitting at the bottom of the sea. And Sifa was with me. And Antonia was there also. But for the first time, Antonia was like a normal little girl. And she was clean and pretty and happy. And I'd never seen her like that before. And she was beautiful. She was, Antonia is about maybe 7 or 8 years old. And she's tall and has long red hair and olive skin. And Sifa is maybe 5 or 6 years old, and she's short and has long golden blonde hair and wears a white dress. And I felt truly at peace, like I'd healed the broken parts of me that I had, abused through self-injury and anorexia. And then I began to learn about shamanism, and I began to go to the lower world. And I found an entrance to a cave in my middle world with Sifa and Antonia. And then I went to the lower world and I met my grandfather. And my grandfather died before I was born. But me and him have some strange similarities. We were both like very mentally ill. And we have some other like strange coincidences that happened to both of us. But I would meet him in the lower world, and he would give me advice about how to deal with my body image and my self-hatred. And I remember the first time I saw him, I met him, and I said, Grandpa Reno, I'm lost. I am lost. Like, and this was years ago, actually, when this happened. The first time I met him. And I remember he looked at me and he said, you have to learn to love yourself. And I didn't really understand what that meant until like pretty recently, whenever I started, learning about Buddhism and stuff, that really is at the core of everything about recovering from any kind of spiritual or mental problem, is learning to love yourself. And now I meet with him pretty regularly, and he always gives me very short answers. And very precise answers. But anyway, that's my story. If you guys want to know more, let me know. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks, guys.